So thank you again for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm a big fan.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor.
Yeah, it's awesome. Can you tell me a little bit about your history? I know you're a Bible scholar, but just would like to get to know you better.
I, let's see. I was a typical uh, adolescent religious nerd, fundamentalist when I was in junior high and high school, and actually through a good bit of college at Montclair State in New Jersey. I was involved with the church, with InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and stuff like that, Campus Crusade. But I got interested in the Bible, as of course you sort of have to if you're a good fundamentalist. And it became so intriguing. I just was curious and wanted to know more about it besides the usual edifying business. There's plenty of wisdom and stuff in the Bible, but there's all kinds of intriguing issues and questions. And so as time went by and I became interested in theology and theology of the Bible, I began to think, look at all these problems and these contradictions and things in the Bible. How do I square that with this being the inspired, authoritative Word of God? And I looked at different theories of how the Bible could be inspired and authoritative, even if it had mistakes and flaws. And eventually I wound up thinking, this just does not work. It's just a lot of excuse making. And that didn't detract from the obvious good stuff in the Bible, but it did sort of mean I was the odd man out in the religious circles I inhabited. And so I was alienated from that. And I decided while I was at Gordon Conwell Seminary, where I was not studying for the ministry, but just taking New Testament courses, I decided, evangelical Christianity just isn't for me. Let me start looking at alternatives. And so I began reading people like Rudolf Bultmann and Paul Tillich and various others that we always dismissed. Oh, yeah, these guys are a bunch of liberal unbelievers. Well, I found that they had a lot to say, and I began to look. Well, I read about other religions, I read about other theologies. I still kind of believed there was some sort of a God, but it was very wide open. And I came to believe that the miracles in the Bible were legends and so forth, and that needn't be a bad thing. And so then I got more and more into biblical criticism, form criticism, the oral traditions that are recorded in the Gospels and the Old Testament, and questions of authorship. Did Paul really write these epistles? Were the Gospels written by eyewitnesses? And I eventually thought, nah. So I went to Drew University and got a PhD in systematic theology. And a couple of years after that, I wound up teaching at Mount Olive College in North Carolina, where I live now. This is all in New Jersey to begin with. I'm originally from Mississippi, but I lived as of about age 10. My parents moved to New Jersey. I lived there for uh, oh, 10 or more years and moved to North Carolina with my brand new doctorate in hand and taught at a Baptist college. And but I kind of got sick of that and I went back to New Jersey with my wife, and I became the pastor of a sort of a liberal Baptist church up there, and decided, I got enough time on my hands. I think I'll go back to Drew University and work on a second doctorate in New Testament this time. And I got that, and then shortly thereafter left the Baptist church, flirted with Unitarianism, decided, nah, I don't buy that. And I worked as an adjunct instructor at different schools, and I began to write books, including my two doctoral dissertations. And I wrote a book called Beyond Born Again, which kind of set forth the reasons for how I became disillusioned with conservative Christianity. And then I began doing a lot of writing, articles, and more books. And eventually, well, I moved back to North Carolina and started doing uh, video. Online stuff, podcasts and the like, with different hosts, and eventually started my own thing, The Bible Geek. And my wife and I hosted discussion groups we called Heretics Anonymous. It was loads of fun. And I went to the Episcopal Church for a while. Now I kind of got sick of church, but I wind up very interested in all the religions. I respect them all. I love all of them. Their scriptures, their history. But I kind of feel like Joseph Campbell. It's now too late for me really to believe in any one of them. But I don't hate it. Just the opposite. I think all religions are amazing creations of the human spirit, and I appreciate all of them. And I even have a book coming out, a massive 600 pager called Houses of the Holy, about 12 different world religions. And so and I write fiction. I've got heavily into H.P. Lovecraft and Robert E. Howard and Edgar Rice Burroughs, and I've for years edited uh, journals and things with dedicated to the study of their work. And I've written loads of short stories and one novel, and so I'm keeping pretty busy, I guess, with all of this.
Wow, that's awesome. I appreciate that. I see a lot of your work on Facebook. I follow it.
Oh,
So I want to
hmm.
ask you, yeah, I want to ask you the first question. Were Adam and Eve the first humans? What are your thoughts?
They couldn't really have been. There wouldn't have been enough of a gene pool there. If you take Genesis literally, which I don't, I think it's a collection of myths, pretty much of a piece with the Gilgamesh epic and the Enuma Elish and Greek mythology, ways in which pre critical people use their great ingenuity to try to figure out how the world got the way it is, but they had no real way of knowing. And yet the myths they spun out have a lot of profundity to them. So I don't think there was an Adam and Eve. We probably just, mutated our way out of apedom, basically.
Right. Because I noticed in the book of Genesis, after Cain killed Abel, he was worried that someone would do something to him. And it
Mm,
said he was sent out to, I believe, the land of Nod, where
mm.
he feared something could happen amongst that land. Any thoughts on that? Was that a group of people you think? Is that where he got his wife from, perhaps?
Yeah, that is an age old conundrum that I think has been solved, because Russell Gmirkin, who is a brilliant Old Testament scholar, has pointed out that it looks like these early Genesis stories are actually based on Plato's Timaeus and Critias, two of his dialogues. And there he also has a high god creating a bunch of subordinate gods, like in Deuteronomy 32. 8 through 9, it says, when Elyon, God Most High, uh, separated the human race into nations, he did so according to the number of the sons of God, so that each would have a nation to rule. And of them, Yahweh or Jehovah, one of the sons, chose Israel. Well, that's very similar to in Plato, where the various Olympian gods were the sons of the high god, and each one had his own nation with his own people. And Gmirkin says that solves the problem because Adam and Eve in the story are just the first people of Israel. The other gods had their own creations. Clarence Darrow asked William Jennings Bryan during the Scopes trial, said, "Where'd Cain get his wife? Somebody pull off another creation in the next county?" Yeah, apparently that is the background of the story. So he gets a wife from there, and when he says, "Whoever finds me will slay me," who? I mean, if you killed your brother and you got your parents, they're going to be gunning for you. What are you talking about? Well, of course, he means, yeah, there are plenty of others. And so God gives him this tribal tattoo, the mark of Cain, so that people will know it and say, hey, you better steer clear of this guy. That's the guy, the murderer. And it all begins to make sense. It's still mythology, but it's not stupid. That I regard myself as a kind of a defender of the Bible. I wrote a book called When Gospels Collide, where I go through all these contradictions between the Gospels. And I'd say, what does this mean? That the Gospel writers were all stupid morons making mistakes? No, they edited the earlier texts to make a different point. And I'm saying this, people that think they're defending the Bible by saying, "Oh, it has no errors, no contradictions." You're just making it hard for intelligent people to accept this. If you'll open your eyes and take off the blinders, you'll see that it's a lot more complicated, but it makes a lot of sense. You're making it look stupid. That's my approach. I do critical study of the Bible, but in order to make it understandable. Uh, so that's kind of my whole pitch, I guess.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that explanation. Also in Genesis, just to give you a little bit about my background, I used to be at the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses for 10 years.
Wow.
And
Hmm.
so on the first year, they would require that you read the Bible from front to back. And I
Mm.
continued that throughout my years. But
Bravo.
one of the first things that struck me was that in Genesis chapter 1, it says in the creation timeline that on the third day there was fruit yielding trees, right? And then on the next day was the sun and the moon. So in school, science, we learn about photosynthesis, right? So how does that work when you have fruit trees being created before the sun and the moon?
Yeah, they just didn't know about that, and they figured if it's a day long, and there's no reason to think they didn't mean a regular day. It's kind of like fairy tale magic. That It's like God pulling Eve out of the side of Adam. There's no way to explain it scientifically because these guys didn't know enough. They weren't stupid, but how could they know, really? Photosynthesis? What the heck is that? Just speaking in tongues? They just couldn't have. Or the rainbow. Oh, it's the war bow of God in the sky. No, it's not. It's refraction of light, but they couldn't have known that. Were they stupid? No, they were quite intelligent. They said there's got to be an explanation for that, and they came up with the best thing they could, given their state of knowledge. And I think it's the same thing with that. We don't see the trees having anything to do with the sun. Maybe they don't, and they just couldn't make the connection.